Everyone thought the Sterling wedding would be the fairy tale of the year, right up until the groom vanished minutes before he was supposed to walk down the aisle. Guests whispered, cameras scanned the empty altar, and in the middle of the chaos stood Amara, his black bride, calm, radiant, and strangely unafraid. She already knew Nathaniel wasn't missing. He was hiding, preparing the final move in a scheme he'd crafted for weeks. A plan to humiliate her publicly, break the engagement on camera, and walk away the wounded hero. What he didn't know was that Amara had been expecting this moment long before he ever decided to betray her. She'd read every sign, traced every lie, and set her own trap hours before the ceremony even began. Because when he finally stepped out, nothing went the way he imagined. Amara felt it the moment she stepped into the Sterling estate that morning, a heaviness in the air, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. She used to love this place, or at least the parts of it she was allowed to love. The warm kitchen where her mother used to hum while polishing silver. The garden path Nathaniel once walked her down when everything between them was soft and private. But now, every corner felt colder, quieter, almost watchful. And no matter how many times she smoothed her engagement ring between her fingers, she couldn't shake the sense that something in her life had shifted just slightly off its axis. Nathaniel had barely spoken to her in days, offering only clipped greetings and a ghost of a smile that never reached his eyes. When she asked if he was all right, he'd simply murmur, "Just busy," before disappearing into another meeting, another phone call, another locked room she wasn't welcome in. Busy had become his shield. Distance had become his language. And Amara, caught between hope and dread, felt herself shrinking into the spaces he no longer filled. The whispers didn't help. They traveled through the estate like smoke, thin, poisonous, impossible to grasp. A florist arranging centerpieces leaned close to another worker, muttering, "She must have trapped him somehow." A family friend, pretending not to see Amara walk by, murmured, "It'll blow over. Nathaniel's just being kind." And a board member, with a smile too wide, congratulated her and then added, "You've come a long way. Not everyone gets this. Lucky." The word clung to her skin like grime. Lucky. As if she didn't deserve any of it. As if she was an accident waiting to be corrected. Still, she tried to brush it all away. She tried to remember the Nathaniel who used to wait for her by the garden gate with 2 steaming cups of tea. The Nathaniel who once said, quietly and without hesitation, "I see you, Amara. Not the girl they expect you to be." That was the man she had agreed to marry. That was the man she believed existed beneath the polished sheen of Sterling tradition. But lately, whenever she looked into his eyes, she found only reflections of someone she no longer recognized. One evening, as she stood in the empty ballroom reviewing seating charts, she heard Nathaniel in the hallway, his voice low, sharp, nothing like the gentle tones he used to reserve for her. She stepped closer, just enough to catch the tension threading through his words. "I don't care," he snapped into the phone. "Just make sure the board is calm. Father's already on edge. The wedding is happening, but—" A pause, a sigh thick with frustration. "No, I said I'll handle her. Don't make this harder." The call ended with a thud, and Amara moved back just in time for him to storm past her without noticing she was there at all. For the first time, she wondered if the engagement ring on her finger meant something different to him now. Something heavy, something inconvenient. She could feel the fear rising in her chest, twisting in ways she didn't dare name. But she forced herself to breathe, to straighten, to continue placing tiny gold name cards on their velvet-lined table. Wedding planning left no room for panic. Later that night, she found herself sitting alone in her bedroom, the lights dim and the windows open to a soft wind that smelled like approaching rain. She replayed every moment of the last month, Nathaniel's sudden withdrawal, the board members' polite smiles, the way his father looked at her like she was a stain on the family portrait. It formed a pattern she didn't want to acknowledge. Something was wrong. Something was building. and she was the only one pretending not to notice. "Maybe I'm imagining it," she whispered to herself. But she knew she wasn't. Days slipped by, each one tightening the string around her ribs. Nathaniel stayed late at the office. He canceled their cake tasting. He skipped their vow rehearsal entirely, sending his assistant with an apologetic note that didn't sound like him at all. Amara moved around the estate like a ghost, performing her duties with a calm face and a heart that beat too loudly in every quiet room. What hurt most wasn't his anger or the gossip. It was the silence that settled between them like a wall, thick and impenetrable. She found herself studying him from across rooms, searching for any sign of the man she once held on to. His jaw was tighter now, his shoulders strained beneath every suit, his eyes were hollow in a way that frightened her more than the rumors ever could. One afternoon, while walking past the study, she heard Nathaniel speaking with his father. Their voices were muffled but tense, slicing through the thick wooden door. She slowed, drawn by instinct more than curiosity. His father's voice boomed first, sharp and commanding. "You can't back out now. The press knows, the shareholders know. Just do what needs to be done." Nathaniel's reply was low but strained. "I will. I said I would. Just let me handle it." "Good," his father grunted. "Because the wedding is the perfect stage. One clean cut, no lingering mess." A chill crawled across Amara's skin. She pressed a hand to her chest, trying to quiet the pounding beneath her ribs. A clean cut. No lingering mess. The words echoed through her mind like a warning bell. It didn't sound like they were discussing a ceremony. It sounded like they were discussing her. She stepped back, her heartbeat thudding louder than her footsteps. Doubt clawed at her, but clarity followed close behind. The distance, the coldness, the rehearsals he kept avoiding, the way everyone looked at her like she was temporary. The truth settled over her in a slow, devastating wave. Nathaniel didn't intend to marry her. He intended to end her. And worse, he planned to do it in front of everyone. Amara reached for the wall to steady herself, her breath shallow, the hallway spinning for a brief moment. The wedding was only days away, but suddenly it didn't feel like a celebration waiting to unfold. It felt like a stage being built for her humiliation. She closed her eyes, pressing her lips together to stop them from trembling. The man she once trusted was preparing to destroy her, but what she didn't know, not yet, was why. And that unanswered question was about to pull her deeper into a truth she wasn't prepared for. Amara didn't mean to hear the rest of the conversation, but once she caught the first sentence, her body refused to move. It was as if the house itself, the marble floors, the brass handles, the heavy curtains, had frozen around her, holding her still in that narrow slice of shadow behind the half-closed door. Nathaniel's voice cut through the silence like a cold blade, calm and controlled in a way that made her stomach twist. "I'll deal with it at the wedding," he said. "Publicly, cleanly. She'll never threaten the family's image again." His father hummed, satisfied. She felt the words land, each one heavy enough to bruise. She didn't breathe until their footsteps faded down the hall. Even then, her lungs worked in jagged, uneven pulls as if her body hadn't quite learned how to take air anymore. She pressed her fist to her mouth, steadying herself, swallowing down the instinct to run. Running would make her look guilty. Running would make their version of the story the truth. And she refused to let that happen. So she straightened her spine, stepped out of the shadowed corner, and forced her feet to move. Every step felt like walking across thin ice, but she kept going. Because if Nathaniel had a plan, she needed one too. The next few days unfolded like a performance she hadn't auditioned for. Everywhere she turned, someone was watching her. The wedding planner's smile was sweet but tight, stretched over a flicker of something uneasy in her eyes. The florist from earlier kept pausing whenever Amara passed, hands still, gaze sharp. And Nathaniel's father, he watched her, openly, his expression unreadable, as if waiting for her to slip, waiting for her to prove his prejudice right. But the board members were the ones who unnerved her most. They appeared at every rehearsal dressed in polite curiosity, hiding sharp judgment beneath warm handshakes and hollow blessings. One of them, a tall man with silver hair, approached her during the menu tasting. "You've handled all this attention well," he said. "Some people crumble under pressure." His eyes dipped to her ring, lingered, then returned to her face with a smile that didn't reach his pupils. It wasn't a compliment. It was a warning, disguised as courtesy. Amara smiled back anyway. She had learned long ago that smiling disarms people who want you small. Still, the pressure grew thicker around her, like invisible hands tightening. She barely slept, lying awake in the dark as questions gnawed at her. Why this plan? Why now? Why a public cutting instead of a private conversation? The answer came slowly, piece by piece, from late-night whispers she overheard, documents she glimpsed on Nathaniel's desk, and old memories of her mother's trembling voice telling her, "Some truths are too dangerous for people with power." For weeks she had tried not to think about what the Sterlings had done to her mother. But now, the puzzle pieces fit together too perfectly. The quiet dismissal, the lies told to protect the family name, the single paycheck they offered as a severance that felt more like hush money. Amara had been a child, but she didn't forget the day her mother came home with red eyes and trembling hands. She didn't forget the silence that swallowed their tiny apartment afterward. The Sterlings thought she didn't know. They thought she couldn't possibly remember, but she did. And somehow they had realized she did too. The realization chilled her blood. Suddenly the looks, the tension, the urgency to remove her made sense. She wasn't just an outsider marrying into the family. She was a liability. Someone who had seen the Sterlings without their masks on. Someone who could ruin them. That made her dangerous. And in the Sterling world, dangerous people were eliminated with precision. Not violence, but reputation. Integrity stripped clean. Character shredded. Future destroyed. Amara understood now. The wedding wasn't just a ceremony. It was a stage built for her execution. But even with the fear coiled tight in her stomach, something stronger flickered beneath it. A quiet, steady burn she hadn't felt since she was a teenager standing beside her mother, promising herself she would never let anyone silence her again. She refused to be their victim. Still, pretending everything was normal required strength she didn't know she had. Every morning she applied makeup with steady hands, even though she felt like her reflection could crack at any moment. She practiced her wedding walk, her shoulders square, even though her heartbeat thudded too, loudly in her ears. When Nathaniel did appear, brief and distant, she matched his composure with a calmness so controlled it felt rehearsed. He looked at her sometimes as if trying to read something in her face. Hesitation, confusion, fear. But she let nothing slip. One evening, she found him standing on the balcony overlooking the garden. Soft lamplight brushed the edge of his jaw, highlighting the exhaustion carved into his features. For a moment, she almost forgot everything and remembered only the boy who once handed her wildflowers and whispered that he liked the way she smiled at the sky. He turned slightly when she stepped outside. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked. "No," she replied. A long silence stretched between them, full of everything they no longer said. He opened his mouth as if to speak, then closed it again, his gaze drifting toward the far end of the property. "Big day coming," he murmured. "A very big day," she echoed. He nodded, jaw tightening. "I hope it goes smoothly." "I'm sure it will," she said softly. She didn't mean it, and somehow he seemed to hear the honesty hidden beneath the calm. For a fleeting second, their eyes met, his full of conflict, hers full of quiet fire. Then the moment broke, and he walked away without another word. After that night, she watched everyone more closely. The planner kept receiving hushed phone calls she quickly ended whenever Amara approached. Nathaniel's father spent hours in closed-door meetings with people she didn't recognize, lawyers perhaps, or PR strategists, and the board members began arriving earlier and earlier, as if rehearsing something she wasn't invited to witness. Each clue felt like another thread tightening around her, pulling her toward a truth she wasn't supposed to discover. And then, one afternoon, she overheard two house staff whispering near the service entrance. "Mr. Sterling said the announcement has to be dramatic," one muttered. "Impactful?" "Poor girl," the other replied. "She doesn't see it coming." The first scoffed. "They never do." Amara stepped back before they spotted her, her hands trembling despite her steady breath. She had heard enough. More than enough. Shock no longer ripped through her. Now there was only purpose. She would not wait for the blow. She would not stand quietly while they destroyed her. She moved through the final days before the ceremony with a new steadiness, gathering every detail she could, piecing together the full scope of what Nathaniel and his father planned. Each night she made lists, gathered documents, memorized conversations, and replayed the sound of Nathaniel's voice saying she would never threaten the family's image again. Threaten. Not embarrass. Not hurt. Threaten. It was confirmation she needed. By the night before the wedding, her decision was made. She would not run. She would not hide. She would not let the Sterlings rewrite her story the way they had rewritten her mother's. As dawn crept over the horizon and light spilled across the estate's manicured lawns, Amara stood at her bedroom window, her hands still, her breath calm. The wedding day had arrived, and she finally understood something essential. Survival wasn't enough. The truth had to be exposed, no matter what it cost. Amara found him by following the silence, not the ordinary kind, the deep, pressured kind that feels like a storm holding its breath. It pulled her down the corridor, past half-lit sconces and rows of empty chairs, straight toward the ballroom where everything would unravel in a few hours. And when she stepped inside, she saw Nathaniel standing alone in the middle of the polished floor, staring at the altar as if it were a battlefield he didn't know how to cross. For a moment, she almost turned back. Her heart was pounding so hard she thought he might hear it, but something inside her whispered that this was the last chance to face the man she used to know. So she stepped forward, her heels echoing across the vast room. Nathaniel's head lifted at the sound. When he saw her, something flickered across his face. Surprise, then guilt, then something she couldn't name. "You're up early," he said softly. "So are you," she replied. Her voice didn't shake. That surprised her. "Couldn't sleep." "Not really." He tried to smile. It didn't hold. The chandelier lights washed him in a glow that made him look older than he was, tired in a way money could never fix. He shoved his hands into his pockets, a gesture she'd seen him do as a teenager when he was nervous. Back then, it was endearing. Now, it broke her a little. She didn't bother with small talk. There wasn't time left for pretending. "Nathaniel," she began, stepping closer, "I need to ask you something." He stiffened. "Amara, today isn't the day." "It has to be," she cut in, "because if I don't ask now, I won't get another chance." Silence stretched, thin and tense. His eyes shifted away, landing somewhere on the glossy floor. She could see the war in his posture, shoulders pulled tight, jaw clenched as if he already knew what was coming. "What happened to you?" she whispered. "To us?" She swallowed hard. "You used to look at me like you were proud of it. Proud of choosing me. And now you barely look at me at all." He blinked, the words hitting him like a soft blow. "Amara." "I'm not asking for an excuse," she said quietly. "Just the truth. Why did everything change?" For a long moment, Nathaniel didn't speak. He moved a hand to the back of his neck, massaging it like he was trying to work out a knot that had been there for weeks. When he finally met her eyes, his voice was low, almost worn. "Because I got scared." She hadn't expected that. Not from him. Scared of what? His laugh was short and hollow. Of everything. The board. My father. Losing. Control of the company. Losing the approval of people who… He stopped, shaking his head. People who shouldn't matter this much. Amara stood still, letting his confession settle. The ballroom suddenly felt smaller, as if the walls had drawn close to listen. You think being with me risks all that, she said. He didn't deny it. His silence was enough. It stung, but she pushed through it. You once said you cared about me. I still do, he said quickly. Too quickly. That's the problem. Well, she murmured, it stopped feeling like you did. Nathaniel swallowed, his breath unsteady. Amara, you don't understand the pressure I'm under. One wrong move and everything collapses. My father doesn't trust me. The board barely tolerates my decisions. They think I'm soft, easy to manipulate. And marrying you? He exhaled, defeated. They consider it a weakness I can't afford. There it was, the truth dressed in shame. And you listened to them, she said softly. The words pierced, and he flinched. I didn't want to. I kept trying to ignore them. But every day someone whispered something, asked what I was thinking, suggested ways to fix the situation. He shook his head again, voice cracking in a way she had never heard. I let myself get swallowed by them. By fear. By this damned dynasty that wants everything but humanity. A small tremor moved through her chest. This wasn't the cold strategist she had prepared herself to confront. This was the boy she once loved. The one who carried his heart like a fragile thing and never wanted anyone to see it. What about me? She asked quietly. Where was I in all of that? He laughed bitterly. You were the only part that felt real. That's what terrified me most. Her throat tightened. She didn't blink. I tried to distance myself, Nathaniel continued. Tried to make you believe I didn't care. It was stupid. It hurt you. I know that. But fighting them, fighting my father, it's exhausting, Amara, and I didn't know if I had the strength to protect both the company and you. You didn't have to protect me, she said, barely above a whisper. You just had to stand with me. He closed his eyes, pained. I know. Another silence. This one heavier than the last. When he opened his eyes again, they were wet around the edges. If things were different, he murmured, if the world wasn't watching, if my father didn't have a leash around my life, I would have chosen you freely, gladly, without hesitation. Her breath caught. For a moment she saw the truth in him, raw, unpolished, unguarded. The truth of someone who had loved her once and was terrified to admit it had never fully stopped. But the truth wasn't enough. It wouldn't save her from what he planned to do. She stepped back, just far enough to breathe clearly again. Thank you for telling me, she said softly. I needed to hear it, even if it's too late. Amara. His hand lifted as if he wanted to reach for her, but he let it fall before it met the air between them. She turned away, taking slow steps toward the doorway. Her heart ached with every movement, but her resolve hardened. He wasn't her enemy, not the true one, but he wasn't her protector either. Not anymore. Just before she crossed the threshold, she paused. She didn't look back, but her voice carried through the room, steady and calm. Whatever happens today, remember that you had a choice. The ballroom remained silent behind her as she walked away, her pulse strong, her mind sharpened into clarity. She had seen the last piece she needed, the flicker of humanity still alive inside Nathaniel Sterling. And now, she knew what to fight for. Not revenge, not survival. Liberation. The truth would set her free, and it would rewrite everything he thought he controlled. Amara could feel the entire weight of the day pressing against her ribs as the music swelled and the guests rose to their feet. It was a beautiful ceremony, almost painfully beautiful. Flowers draped in perfect arches, candles lined in symmetrical rows, a soft golden haze floating through the air like dust caught in a dream. But beneath all that polish, there was something sharp, something cold, something waiting. And Amara felt it move beneath her skin like a warning she had learned not to ignore. The doors opened. Cameras flashed. She stepped forward. Every eye in the room followed her, some in admiration, others in quiet calculation. She walked slowly, each step measured, her dress whispering across the aisle like it had its own pulse. She wasn't nervous, not in the way a bride should be. Her heartbeat was steady, almost eerily calm, because she knew exactly what was about to unfold. Everyone else was walking into a ceremony. Amara was walking into a reckoning. Nathaniel stood at the altar, hands clasped together, trying to mask the storm beneath his expression. He looked at her with a strange mix of awe and dread, as though the closer she got, the harder it became to hold on to the plan he had been pushed into. His father stood near the front row, gaze fixed on her like a man watching a threat approach, not a daughter-in-law-to-be. Amara reached the altar, the murmurs fading into a blanket of silence. She offered Nathaniel a small, unreadable smile. He didn't return it. His throat bobbed as he swallowed. The officiant began speaking, but Amara barely heard the words. She was listening to something else. The tremor in Nathaniel's breath, the quiet shuffle of board members preparing for their staged moment, the anticipation curling around the audience like smoke. Her eyes drifted upward to the chandelier lights, warm and bright, and for a split second she felt an odd sense of peace. She had waited weeks for this. She had suffered through whispers, through pitying smiles, through betrayal. That tasted like ash. And now it was her turn. "Before we continue," the officiant said, glancing at Nathaniel, "the groom has prepared a few—" But Nathaniel never got the chance to speak. Because at that exact moment, every light in the ballroom abruptly dimmed. Gasps scattered through the crowd. A few guests instinctively reached for their phones, confused murmurs rippling in the sudden darkness. Then a soft hum filled the air. A projector flickered to life against the front wall. Nathaniel's eyes widened. "Amara," he whispered, voice barely a breath. "What did you—" She didn't look at him. She kept her gaze forward. On the screen, the first image appeared, an old photo of her mother, standing beside a Sterling-branded staff door, smiling with tired eyes. The timestamp showed it was taken 2 days before she was dismissed. A quiet gasp escaped someone in the front row. Then audio began to play. A stern voice, Nathaniel's father, echoed through the ballroom speakers. "She's a liability. Get rid of her quietly. She knows too much about the supply chain issue." A murmur surged through the wedding like a wave crashing into itself. The footage shifted. Now it showed a series of emails, real, time-stamped, detailing the cover-up of the wrongful firing. Details about how they blamed Amara's mother for inventory issues she never caused. Instructions from executives to make her disappear professionally. Legal threats drafted but never sent. Someone choked back a shocked cry. Another whispered, "My God!" Nathaniel's father shot up from his seat, face flushing an ugly red. "Turn it off," he barked, pointing at his staff. "Turn that damn thing off right now." No one moved, because the video kept going. New audio filled the room, voices from closed-door meetings Amara had quietly recorded. A board member sneered, "If Nathaniel dumps her at the altar, it'll send a message. Investors like decisive leaders." Another responded, "Yes, make her look manipulative, emotional. It'll destroy her credibility if she ever speaks about her mother." The crowd erupted in horrified whispers. Phones lifted, cameras rolled. Journalists in the back rows sprang to their feet, capturing everything. Nathaniel stood frozen beside Amara, shock hollowing out his face. "You knew," he whispered, "all along. You knew." Amara finally turned her head toward him, her voice soft but unwavering. "I warned you that choices have consequences." The last segment of the video played. A brief clip of Nathaniel's father telling the planner, "Make sure she signs the annulment papers today. Public humiliation speeds up compliance." The lights snapped back on. Silence. The kind of silence that swallows a room whole. Amara stepped forward, her movements deliberate. She faced the audience. Hundreds of faces staring at her with disbelief, sympathy, guilt. "I'm not here to ruin a wedding," she said, her tone calm, almost gentle. "I'm here because this family has spent years destroying what it fears. My mother, her truth, and now, me." Her voice steadied, clear and resonant. "I will not belong to a family built on silence and cruelty. I will not marry into a legacy that thrives by breaking the people beneath it." She turned to Nathaniel. Their eyes held. Pain, regret, understanding, all tangled together. "And I won't let you become the man they're forcing you to be," she whispered. His lips parted, but no sound emerged. A board member stumbled to his feet. "This is absurd," he stammered. This can't." But several cameras snapped in his direction, capturing his panic. Too late. The truth was already free. Nathaniel's father shoved his chair back with a screech and stormed toward the exit, shouting orders at staff who no longer knew whom to obey. Journalists chased after him like a trail of sparks. The wedding dissolved instantly, guests rising, arguing, whispering, tripping over their own confusion. In the center of it all, Amara remained still. She lifted her chin, adjusted her dress, and turned away from the altar where she was meant to be destroyed. She didn't hurry. She didn't hide. She walked down the aisle slowly, gracefully, as though every step reclaimed a piece of herself. By the time she reached the exit, the ceremony had collapsed into chaos behind her. But the moment she pushed through the grand doors, she heard footsteps following. Quick, uneven, desperate. Nathaniel. "Amara," he called, breathless. "Please, just wait." She didn't stop. Not yet. She paused only when she reached the courtyard, early sunlight brushing her skin like a quiet blessing. Then she turned. Her eyes met Nathaniel's, shaken, pleading, raw, and before she said a word, he whispered, "I need to understand. The woman I almost destroyed." The wind shifted between them. A pause. A fracture. A door cracking open to the next chapter neither of them expected. And nothing, absolutely nothing, would be the same after this moment. Nathaniel reached her before she made it to the gates, his footsteps fast and uneven on the stone pathway. "Amara, please," he called, breath scraping out of him like he'd been running for miles. She didn't turn right away. She let the cool morning air fill the space between them, let him feel the distance she had carried alone for weeks. When she finally faced him, he stopped short, chest rising and falling, eyes wide with something between panic and regret. "I'm sorry," he said instantly. No excuses, no rehearsed charm, just the raw admission of a man stripped down to the truth. "I didn't know." He cut himself off, shaking his head. "No, that's not right. I did know. I just didn't want to face what it would cost me." Amara looked at him carefully, studying the man who had once felt safe, then dangerous, then heartbreakingly familiar again. His suit was disheveled, his tie crooked, his hands trembling like he had finally realized the scale of everything he'd allowed to happen. She spoke quietly. "Fear isn't an excuse for cruelty." He flinched, but he didn't look away. I know that now." The world around them was strangely still, muffled voices of shocked guests behind them, the soft rustle of leaves overhead, the faint hum of cars passing outside the estate. Yet in their small corner of the courtyard, it felt like only the two of them existed. Nathaniel took a step closer. "I should have stood by you. I should have fought for you instead of hiding behind the company." His voice cracked. "You trusted me, and I let my father convince me that protecting the business mattered more than protecting the woman I—" He inhaled sharply. The woman I cared about. Amara didn't interrupt. She let his words settle, heavy but sincere. I kept telling myself I'd fix things later, he said, voice softer now. That once the pressure eased, I'd find a way back to you. But pressure never eased, and I let that turn me into someone I'm ashamed of. Amara felt something shift in her chest. Not forgiveness, but recognition. He wasn't lying. This was the man she'd glimpsed in the ballroom earlier. The man she had almost hoped still existed under all the layers of sterling expectation. But honesty arrived too late. "Nathaniel," she said gently, "I don't hate you." His eyes flickered with surprise. "I just can't go back to who I was with you," she continued. "Someone who had to shrink so you could fit into the version of power they wanted for you." He swallowed hard. "I never wanted you to shrink." "But you didn't stop them when they tried to cut me down," she replied. "That's the same thing." Her words hung in the air, tender but unyielding. For the first time since she'd known him, Nathaniel looked truly defeated. Not because he'd lost her, but because he finally understood how deeply he'd failed her. He ran a hand through his hair, exhaling in a shaky rush. "I was supposed to protect you, and you ended up protecting yourself from me." Amara's expression softened, but she didn't step closer. "I learned to protect myself a long time ago." A breeze drifted through the courtyard, brushing her veil, lifting a few loose strands of his hair. They stood in the quiet of it, two people who once walked side by side, now separated by choices that couldn't be undone. Nathaniel cleared his throat. "What happens now?" "I move forward," she said simply. "And me?" he asked, almost afraid of the answer. She met his eyes with calm clarity. "You face what you created. Not because I want you to suffer, but because it's the only way you'll ever become better than the men who raised you." He looked down, then nodded, the acceptance sinking deep in his bones. "You're stronger than I ever gave you credit for." Amara offered a faint smile. "I always was. You just couldn't see it when you were looking through their expectations." Silence again, lighter this time, almost peaceful. Nathaniel stepped back first, not out of rejection, but respect. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for telling me the truth, even if it's the hardest thing I've ever heard." She breathed in slowly, feeling the weight of everything beginning to lift off her shoulders. "Thank you for finally being honest, even if it's too late to change anything." His lips parted like he wanted to say more, but he closed them again. Some truths needed time. Some apologies weren't meant to be followed by promises. Amara took one final look at him. Not the broken groom, not the heir desperate for approval, but the boy she had once laughed with beneath the old oak tree, before life grew sharp around them. Then she turned and walked toward the gates, sunlight catching the edge of her dress. Her steps were steady, free. Behind her, Nathaniel watched with a hollow ache in his chest, knowing she wasn't walking away from him. She was walking toward the version of her life she'd always deserved. And though he didn't follow this time, he whispered into the quiet, "I hope you find everything they tried to take from you." The gates opened. The world beyond them felt wide and bright. Amara didn't look back, and somewhere inside the shattered remains of the wedding, Nathaniel realized this moment, the one he never intended to face, would change both of their futures in ways neither of them could imagine yet. Months later, they would both learn just how true that was. 6 months can pass quietly, or they can remake a life. For Amara, they did the latter. The world that once tried to shrink her now felt wide and alive, opening pathways she never imagined when she was standing in that suffocating ballroom. Her mornings began with purpose instead of dread. Early sunlight spilling across a small office filled with mismatched furniture, stacks of case files, and the warm chatter of women she had vowed to help. Her nonprofit wasn't glamorous, but every inch of it was built from something real, something earned, something hers. Sometimes, when she unlocked the door at dawn, She thought of her mother, of the strength she carried quietly, the kindness she never weaponized. Amara carried her legacy differently, loud enough for the world to hear this time, and with every woman who walked through her office trembling from workplace injustice, Amara felt that legacy settled deeper into her own bones. Her confidence, once something she had to pretend into existence, now unfolded naturally. She laughed more freely, spoke more boldly, walked into rooms as if she belonged, because she finally believed she did. Interviews followed, articles, panels. She didn't seek attention, but when a local news station asked to feature her nonprofit, she said yes, her voice, steady as she shared her story without naming the Sterlings at all. The truth didn't need their names anymore. And miles across the city, Nathaniel watched that interview from an office that felt emptier than it used to. The Sterling crest still hung behind him, but the air around it had changed. His father was gone, pushed out by a board tired of public scandal, and the company was bruised, forced into a slow rebuilding process that demanded transparency, ethics, and accountability. Nathaniel had chosen all three. It cost him allies, status, and the last remnants of the boy who once tried to please everyone. But watching Amara speak, he couldn't help the soft ache that tightened in his chest. She looked radiant. Not in the glamorous, polished way his world valued, but in a way that came from freedom, from truth, from choosing herself. Her voice carried warmth even when she spoke about hard things, and her smile was unguarded, proud, alive. He leaned closer to the screen without meaning to, whispering to no one, "You did it." A colleague knocked lightly on his door. "The investors are waiting," they said. Nathaniel nodded, tearing his gaze away from the screen reluctantly. "I'm coming." As the door closed again, he allowed himself one more glance, one last moment of quiet admiration. He knew he had no place in her future now. Maybe he never truly did. But letting her walk away had been the first time he acted on principle instead of fear, and in a strange, unexpected way, that choice had become the backbone of the man he was trying to become. Meanwhile, Amara didn't think of Nathaniel often, not out of resentment, but because her life finally had room for other thoughts. She was learning to expand into her own joy, to say yes to opportunities without wondering how the Sterlings would react, to feel her mother's pride in every victory, big or small. And she didn't know that somewhere across town, the man who once almost broke her had grown into someone who finally understood what it meant to love without possession. One evening, after a long day of work, Amara stepped out onto the street. The sky was painted with streaks of gold and lavender, the light catching her in a way that made her pause. She inhaled deeply, feeling the warmth on her skin, the soft hum of the city settling into night. For the first time in a long time, she felt completely, undeniably free. She smiled, quiet, genuine, a smile built from everything she had survived and everything she was becoming. The end of a wedding hadn't been the end of her life. It had been the beginning of it. And as she walked into the sunlit evening, she carried that truth with her, step by steady step, toward a future she had reclaimed with her own hands.